Missing from the Maitland lineup was new captain coach Rocky Laurie, and they were like a ship without a rudder. All Souths had to do in the first half was to keep the ball alive, and even when things went astray, they were still able to apply sufficient pressure to the pumpkin pickers, and it wasn't long before their first try. Souths went further ahead with some smart passing in the backs, and after the ball went through many hands, Souths touched down near the posts. Maitland hit back just before half-time with a smart backline move and some good backing up. In what must be a record, Elliott's Lambton were beaten by Shortland Electricity at the No. 2 Sports Ground in an hour and a half. Elliott's were bundled out for 25 runs, with 5 players recording ducks and 1 batsman remaining not out none. He came in at No. 7 and never faced a ball. David Story took 6 for 14 and Shortland made the required 26 runs for victory in the 5th over of their innings. Even when Elliott's had a chance for a cheap wicket in Shortland's innings, they couldn't convert and it hit the turf. On the first day of the district semi-final at the No. 1 Sports Ground, spinner Mark Curry turned in a marvellous bowling display for Charlestown. Curry took 6 for 11 off 20 overs to help Charlestown dismiss Waratah for only 89. Waratah had made a patient start, but the pitch was doing a little and gave the quicker bowlers something to work with. Even when the batsman did pierce the infield, the heaviness of the ground saved many runs for the fielding side. At stumps, Charlestown are 2 for 15.
This morning's threatening clouds were not enough to discourage the Newcastle peace marchers. Almost 1,000 of all ages walked from Pacific Park through the Hunter Mall, adding their voices to those calling for nuclear disarmament. The march, organised by the Newcastle Peace Forum, is a regular event on the Sunday before Easter. A dozen peace, human rights and religious organisations joined ranks for the march, which took them to Civic Park and a rally. Organisers say this year has seen a resurgence of interest in the day of protest as more issues come to the fore.
Our main question, of course, is disarming the seas, but we are also concerned with pollution and environmental issues, because those people who are concerned about the environment are usually the same people who are concerned about peace, because they're concerned about saving this earth we live on and making it a better place to live in.
Van Law was started by 2 men in a backyard shed 20 years ago. The company specialised in the manufacture and design of refuelling and lubrication systems for heavy vehicles. Hard work brought some success. Van Law recently moved into expanded premises at Caves Beach. However, even the new shed may soon prove too small. Van Law is quickly earning an international reputation thanks to a revolutionary refuelling system. The enormous vehicles used in heavy construction and open-cut mines can cost more than $1 million, and time spent off the job is money wasted. Van Law has developed a special nozzle and fittings, which it says mean vehicles can refuel 10 times more quickly than using conventional methods, saving an average mining company $17,000 every month on work time alone. The fast refueller, however, is just a part of an overall system. The company also specialises in customising the heavy vehicle oil and hydraulic lines, allowing them all to be accessed from one port, again saving considerable maintenance time. Despite approaches from larger companies to sell the idea, John Van Law is adamant it will remain in the Hunter.
There's no way would we ever look at trying to sell our ideas or our patents to an outside or a foreign country. This is ours and we're very proud of it.
Alderman McNaughton's first meeting with the Victorian consortium battling AWS for the $5 billion frigate contract was less than amicable, to say the least. In a dramatic confrontation, the Lord Mayor all but threw Amicon representatives out of the city.
Anything that's going to mean anything to this region and this city in the long term is kept away. Controls in Melbourne, controls in Sydney. And quite frankly, we're fed up with it. We've had enough of this sort of nonsense.
Now, however, the Lord Mayor has made an about-face. Amicon has not only been invited to the city, but will be given the opportunity to address the whole council. The Lord Mayor today defended his decision. He says Amicon's last approach was offensive and patronising, but it is important that the council be informed of the consortium's plans for Newcastle if they win the lucrative contract.
We need to know just where we stand with them if they do win the contract, because I'm not convinced that it will mean very much to Newcastle at all, and here will be a place where we can sort that out.
You don't believe this could be perceived as a lessening of support for AWS?
I certainly don't think so, and if plain words mean anything, it certainly isn't. But I do believe that the aldermen of the City Council are entitled to know at first hand what Amicon wish to say. Therefore I invited them up to say it.
On hand for the event were executives of the sponsor, AMP, science teachers from throughout the Hunter region, and Beyond 2000 presenter Jeff Watson. Mr Watson explained how the award has grown since its inception 4 years ago to a record 250 entries last year. The aim is to promote science among young Australians, offering incentives like a $20,000 chaperoned trip to the United States as encouragement for fresh ideas.
People look to us for an answer, as I'm sure they look to you. Young people look to us for an answer, because they think we have all the answers. We certainly don't. I think we can point people in the same direction as you can. That's your job. It's also our job.
Our special guest today was last year's winner, Glenn Sharrock of Tamworth, who demonstrated his two-wheel drive bicycle. Glenn developed his idea out of a need for more traction and better performance off-road. Extra chains pass drive to the front wheel as well, with steering being retained by a universal joint. And Glenn is determined his idea will be a marketing success.
We're looking very eagerly for an Australian company to take up the production of the bicycle, but if this isn't possible, we'll be looking overseas for a producer.
So you're determined to market your idea?
Yes, it's definitely worth marketing.
Glenn will be riding his bicycle across the Simpson Desert in a few weeks' time to prove it does work. Students can get details about the award from science teachers at school or from your headmaster if you're in primary.
Traffic was diverted onto the old highway at 9 Mile Creek, 10 kilometres north of Raymond Terrace, for more than 4 hours, while emergency workers cleared debris. Melbourne driver Gino Kakulian was carrying a load of 120 tyres and 5 pallets of beer when at around 7:30 this morning he noticed flames and smoke rising from the engine below the cabin. The fire is believed to have started from a fuel leak to an overheating turbocharger. Local fire units doused the flames with a foam compound mixed with water, but took 2 hours to finally extinguish the blaze. The truck and contents, which were insured, was valued in excess of $100,000.
Amicon was invited to Newcastle by Lord Mayor John McNaughton to inform aldermen what Newcastle will gain if the consortium wins the $5 billion contract. Tonight's meeting was in stark contrast to Amicon's last public appearance in the city, which brought the wrath of Alderman McNaughton. He accused the consortium of patronising the city. However, the night wasn't without incident. Mayor of Lake Macquarie, Ivan Welsh, interjected, accusing Amicon of conspiring with Labor representatives.
We're being whitewashed in this city. And I accuse you, I accuse the federal government, I accuse our state members of a whitewash of this city.
According to Amicon Managing Director John White, Newcastle has been chosen to share the work due to its position and facilities, not to pacify the residents or politicians. However, he does admit the Victorian consortium has little chance of winning in the popularity stakes here.
We expect that the local community here would naturally be pushing the local consortium. The fact is we have done a lot of work in Newcastle, we intend to do a lot of work in Newcastle, and as the details of our proposal come out, people will become friendly towards us.
The government's proposals for the new make-up of the council has angered university and college chiefs, who think bureaucrats are poised to take control of higher education. But while on the Central Coast today to lay the groundwork for the new campus at Ourimbah, Dr Metherell also prepared the ground for compromise over the council.
It's just simply talking the issue up in perhaps a little bit too excited a way. We've said, here is some draft legislation, you tell us what you want to happen, and what the critics have got to do now is come up with some constructive changes, and we'll be very receptive to those constructive suggestions.
Dr Metherell turned the first sod on the 80-hectare site, which will house an integrated educational facility unique in Australia. TAFE will be introducing 21st century technology, using Ourimbah as a base to beam courses by satellite to other colleges, he said. Educational emphasis will be on tourism, computing and horticulture. On-site houses will be renovated for students who are to begin studying in July. Major construction will begin early in 1992. And he believes the development of a new campus will go hand in hand with major population growth and tourist developments locally.
Mr Howard spent his morning giving radio interviews which focused on issues including the controversial cabinet decision on a third runway for Sydney, but he turned his attention to the Hunter during a luncheon at Maitland. Mr Howard said Liberal candidate Ashley Saunders needed just a 3.7% swing to wrest the seat from Labor hands. The coalition leader said the local failure of Labor at the state level was an encouraging sign. He told a gathering of the party faithful that the Liberal industrial relations policy was not anti-trade union, despite what he called political propaganda by the government.
And I think it's important as I come to this former heartland of the Labor Party to say to all of the trade unionists of Newcastle and the Hunter Valley that there is more in my policy, there is more in my industrial relations policy for the average trade unionist than there is in the policy that is being offered by the Labor Party.
Mr Howard outlined his program to lift national productivity through profit sharing between employers and employees. Although this would clearly curtail union influence, Mr Howard invited Hunter trade union leaders and lifelong Labor voters to consider the performance of the government over the past 5 years.
I invite them to reflect on the fact that the average Australian family's living standard has fallen by $58 a week.
If Mr Howard appeared confident of wooing the Hunter away from Labor, Prime Minister Bob Hawke showed no sign of anxiety during his visit to the region this evening. An outwardly relaxed PM arrived at Cessnock to a civic reception where he made fleeting acknowledgement of Mr Howard's presence in the valley.
I understand that earlier today there's been a fellow wandering around the region.
However, he preferred to concentrate on the Sydney runway decision rather than give away anything on a possible early election. Even so, voters would find it hard not to draw their own conclusions from this apparently coincidental visit.
The former State Rail Authority land is bounded by Wharf Road, Harbourside Park, Bond Street, Stevenson Place, Customs House Plaza and the recent housing development to the east. 2 years ago there was a public outcry over an announcement that the land would go up for sale. Today's handover was greeted warmly, but now it remains to be seen how the council decides to use the land.
But we have confidence in the capacity of the council to undertake the appropriate consultation, make the appropriate assessments of the options that have been outlined, indeed any other options that people might come up with, and ensure that the East End becomes really an integral part of the quality of life both for the people who live in Newcastle proper and indeed for visitors to Newcastle as it becomes an even more splendid coastal city in the years to come.
Lord Mayor John McNaughton said the council will consider various plans which include open space, recreational areas and commercial residential development.
Well, it will be costly. The thing that's particularly costly are those old buildings up there. You've got the massive cost just to make them sound, and we need to do that. And the archaeological dig is going to be expensive. And I've been quite adamant in my view that we must not touch that land until we've got the best possible archaeologists hired, supervising and do it right. We sit on the most important industrial archaeological relic in Australia, and we've got to see that it's looked after.
And where will the money come from to do this work?
Well, might you ask? That's tomorrow's problem.
Greeting the Premier today were two demonstrations. University students staged a mock funeral to mark the 1989 Act, which they claim heralds the death of student representation and rights and freedom of education. And conservationists donned wildlife costumes in a bid to attract the Premier's attention to the government's wilderness policy.
The Big Dog team wasn't alone on its South Pacific adventure. They were joined by nearly 400 passengers from Newcastle. The 9-day cruise aboard the Alexander Pushkin takes in Armidi and the Isle of Pines, as well as 2 days in Noumea. It's all set to be a week of partying, with every day just an extra long Big Dog and Friends show. For instance, this afternoon, Big Dog was hosting his own disco. But apart from all the partying, it's also educational, with a cultural day visit planned in Noumea. Crowds of friends and relatives were on hand to farewell the big ship as she slowly pulled out of the harbour to begin her Pacific Island journey. And yes, even though it is a holiday, Big Dog still goes to bed at 7:30.
The 3 hectares of land in Newcastle's East End have been a jumbled mess for some years now. There are no arguments about improving the old railway site, simply how to do it. Of the 4 options on developing the area, the Northern Parks and Playground movement say there is only one way to go. President Doug Lithgow wants to restore the site to its illustrious past, an area of great historical significance with its links with coal mining and the timber industry. 3 of the options put to council call for a certain amount of housing development on the block. Doug Lithgow says more development would be a tragedy.
We don't need to do that because it's a negative approach, and the positive approach is to go ahead and develop this land as parkland, as it was originally parkland before the railways took it over.
The Parks and Playground movement has called for more support from Macquarie Street, saying Newcastle has been taking second best for too long.
There's millions of dollars spent on historic sites and botanic gardens in Sydney, but there's none spent in the Newcastle area.
Carrington Slipways has already been paid for the first 2 vessels in a contract which began 18 months ago. The third is only 40% completed. The hull, deck and superstructure have been formed and fiberglass sealing of the foam walls is taking place. Managing Director Don Laverick is waiting to talk to the NSC's liquidator to determine the future of the project. However, he feels confident the vessel will be completed and will eventually be pressed into service by the Air Force.
The first 2 went to Darwin. They were in use there in SC rescue work for the RAAF. Where this boat was going hadn't been revealed to us, so we don't really know.
So you're reasonably confident, though, that no matter what happens, you will finish building the boat eventually?
Eventually, yes, I believe that to be the case, Ray, but I can't be certain of that yet, till we hear from the liquidator.
Meanwhile, no jobs are jeopardised by the hold-up. The 10 staff employed on the project will easily be absorbed by other contracts, such as Tangara train mouldings and Antarctic research vessel fiberglass fittings. Ironically, the first of the 13-metre-long self-righting rescue vessels, the Dorothy G. Hobson, is high and dry inside Carrington Slipways shed, having its engines replaced under warranty. The second, the Sid Guthrie, has completed trials in Newcastle and is now in service at Darwin. We'll have to wait to see the fate of the third, but there's one thing you can be sure of. It won't be named the John Friedrich.